All right. So we started reading The Kid in the Red Jacket, and I can't remember the kid's name. Howard? Howard or Harold? Howard's brother's name was Gaylord. I remember that. Oh, come on, Howard. Not today. It's Howard. Okay. Howard. And he's talking about when he met his best friend, Roger, in kindergarten, and they had to, Roger and Thornsberry were his two best friends. Yes. Roger, Thornsberry liked to cry a lot. Roger, liked cows. I liked Roger, though. On the first day of school, Miss Filbert asked us to draw a picture of our family. Roger drew a cow. That's a very nice cow, Roger, she said. But are you sure you understood the project? You were supposed to draw a picture of your family. Roger just smiled happily and nodded. Later, we learned that cows were the only things Roger could draw. By the end of the year, Miss Filbert had taught him to stand them on two legs and dress them in clothes. Personally, I thought this was a big mistake. In kindergarten, every time Roger drew a picture of his family, it looked like they all had cow heads. Before the move, I'd talked a lot of my worries over with Thornsberry and Roger. They hated my leaving almost as much as I did, but they tried to make me feel better about it. Come on, Howard, said Thornsberry. Maybe it won't be as bad as you think. How could it not be bad? I asked glumly. Didn't you ever study about Massachusetts in history? The Pilgrims moved there, and by the first winter, practically all of them were dead. Roger made a face. I hate pilgrims. I've hated them ever since my mother made me be one for Halloween. Remember that? She made me wear that stupid top hat and long black coat. Everyone thought I was Abraham Lincoln carrying a turkey. Thornsberry gave me a funny look. You don't really think you're going to die there, do you, Howard? Well, maybe not actually die, I admitted, but I'm going to have to go to a stupid new school, and that's almost like dying. Every time I thought about it, my stomach tied itself in knots. I can't believe it. I'm actually going to have to be a new kid. Thornsberry and Roger groaned. We got a new kid in our room about a week ago, Roger said. No one can remember his name, so we just call him by the color of his shirt. On Thursday, he was the kid in the green shirt. On Friday, he wore a shirt with his name on it, so we called him the kid in the Kenneth shirt. Thornsberry hit Roger on the arm. We're supposed to be making him feel better, remember? It doesn't matter, I replied. It's not like I don't know what happens to new kids. I've had enough of them in my class to see how hard it is to fit in. Yeah, but you won't have any trouble, Howard, said Roger. It's not like you're a geek or anything. At school, you're practically even popular. Sure, Howard, added Roger. You won't have any trouble. You'll see. Thinking about how nice they had tried to be almost made me start to cry. My mother must have heard me sniffle or something because she turned around. What's the matter? She asked, raising her eyebrows sympathetically. Everything, I answered dismally. Everything's the matter. She just sighed and turned back around. A second later, she threw over a granola bar. Instead of saying thank you, I made a noise like a gorilla. She didn't say anything, but I'm pretty sure she got the message. We had turned onto the highway by then, so I spent the next couple of hours reading signs, trying to get my mind off the move. It wasn't easy, though. Every few minutes, we'd pass a billboard with kids painted on it, and I'd start wondering about the kids in Massachusetts. What would they be like? What would they dress the same way we did in Arizona? I hoped I would fit in. One time we had a German kid visit our school, and he wore a suit and a bow tie. He looked like a little grandfather or something. Anyway, all I've got to say is that moving really stunk, and even though it's over now, I still don't blame myself for the way I acted about it. A lot of mean stuff has been done to me by my parents, by the moving men, and by my father's stupid company. And even though sometimes you can control your anger, you can't control your sadness. And that's what I mostly was. I guess sad. Sad about leaving my friends and my school and my room and my soccer team and a million other things. If you've ever been sad, really sad, you know what I'm talking about. Sadness is with you all the time, even when your friends are trying to make you laugh. Sadness seems to be waiting right behind your smile. Chapter 2. Thanks to Gaylord screaming, the trip to Massachusetts drove us all crazy. I appreciated the job he did on my parents, but unfortunately, I had to listen to him too. For the first 2 days, he was pretty good. By the time we got to Illinois, Gaylord decided he hated his car seat. He screamed from the minute he was strapped in until he cried himself to sleep. Then, when he woke up, he found he was still in the car seat. He screamed all over again. At lunch, my mother asked the waitress if she wanted to buy a baby. Everyone went, ha, but I really think if the waitress could have come up with the cash, Gaylord would still be on the counter at that Denny's. Anyway, when it came to my brothers crying, my dad wasn't exactly overflowing with patience. Every few minutes, he'd turn around and yell, "For heaven's sakes, Gaylord, would you knock it off?" I'm not kidding. He yelled it about 80 times. I think we were somewhere outside of Chicago when my father finally cracked. He pulled over to the side of the highway and told Gaylord to get out of the car. For a second, my mother and I just sat there looking at my dad like he was nuts. I was pretty relieved when he finally calmed down and started smiling about it. The only one who didn't seem to be bothered by Gaylord screaming was my basset hound, Bill. He was sleeping in the back of our station wagon and never even woke up. I guess it's understandable, though. He was on sleeping pills from the vet. Since Bill gets car sick, it was the only way to get him to Massachusetts without making a mess. Actually, the whole thing was pretty interesting. My mother would slip him one of the sleeping pills in the morning and he would start getting groggy right away. First, his legs would go limp and then he would collapse before we could get him into the car. One morning, a little kid was watching in the motel parking lot as my dad tried to lift Bill into the car. He started running up and down the sidewalk screaming, "Doggy dead! Doggy dead!" I've always liked Bill. My mother says he stinks to high heaven, but it's not because he's dirty. He just has a strong dog odor. Anyone who ever pets him always ends up saying, "Phew!" It took us 5.5 days to finally get to Massachusetts. The town of Rosemont, our new home, was about an hour from the state line. Since it was probably going to be a couple of days before the movers arrived with our stuff, Dad had reserved a motel room. Mom carried Gaylord inside and put him down on the bed. Right away, he started kicking his feet and making baby noises. I think he was showing us how cute he was so no one would kill him for all the crying he did. "Keep an eye on your brother for a few minutes, will you, Howard?" asked Mom. "Dad and I have to run up to the motel office." You'd think I would have really minded. You think I would have really minded watching such a brat, but even though Gaylord can get on your nerves sometimes, he's probably as good as you can get for a baby. He's all soft and white, of course, but he doesn't seem to be a sissy baby. His infant seat tilted over backward once, and we found him in the living room, quietly standing on his head and looking at the ceiling. He can actually even be funny once in a while. Like sometimes I'll sit him on my lap and watch him start bobbing around. Once I told my parents we should have named him Bob. After I said it, I laughed for about 2 hours. Finally, my father told me to please shut up. As soon as my parents were gone, I sat down next to Gaylord and looked around us. "Geez, Gaylord, we're really here. I mean, it's actually happening. We're in a new state, all alone, without any friends." Gaylord rolled over and tried to grab his stuffed walrus. He has 2 favorite stuffed animals, Mr. Walrus and Mr. Giraffe. My mother named both of them. Clever, huh? I'm surprised she didn't name Gaylord Mr. Baby. Gaylord stuffed part of Mr. Walrus in his mouth and rolled back over. "No wonder you don't understand how bad this is," I continued. You've got to bring your friends with you. But what about me? What am I supposed to do without Roger and Thornsberry?" Gaylord made a squeaking sound. "Oh, sure, I know I've got you, but let's face the facts, little fella. You're 2 feet tall and you don't understand English. No offense, but right now you're more like a pet." My mother surprised me by opening the door. "You 2 having a nice little chat?" she asked cheerfully. Quite quickly, I jumped up from the bed. I hate it when she sneaks up on me like that. If I'm not careful, she'll catch me doing something nice and think I'm bouncing back. Just then the phone rang. It was the moving company. "You're kidding. That's terrific," my father exclaimed after a few seconds. "You mean they'll actually be ready to unload tomorrow? Those drivers really must have put the pedal to the metal." I hate it when Dad tries to talk like a truck driver. It never sounds natural. His handle on one CB radio is Big Jake. The stupid part is, my father's name is Clifford. Every time he says Big Jake, my mom falls over on the seat laughing. When she was laughing so hard, my father had to turn the CB off so no truckers would hear her. After a few more calls to the electric company and the phone company, Dad took us over to the new house to make sure everything was ready. I didn't want to go. I begged and begged to stay at the motel, but they wouldn't let me. I'm not sure why I hated going so much, but I've been dreading it for a long time. I barely ever looked I'd barely even looked at the pictures of it my parents had tried to show me. See, to me, my old house wasn't just a building. It was part of my family, kind of like my dog. And to stand around oohing and eyeing over pictures of a new one would have been pretty heartless, if you ask me. It's something a traitor would do. I was right about the new house, too. I knew it as soon as we pulled into the driveway. It didn't look like a part of our family at all. It was big and old and looked nothing like my Arizona house. It was made out of brick and was 2 stories tall. It had this giant porch that went almost the whole way around. You see houses like it on TV a lot. There are usually a couple of people sitting outside in rocking chairs talking about good old-fashioned lemonade. Next to the front door was a plaque that read, "Built 1768. When my mother saw it, she practically went nuts. Wow, Howard, look at that. 1768? This house is part of the history of our country. This will certainly be something to write Roger and Thorny about, won't it? I sighed. I could just see the letter now. Dear Roger and Thornsberry, my new house is a part of the history of our country. Whoopee.